All right, Boz, as usual, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so.
We've got a good looking dog in the background. What's the dog's name?
Oh, well, that's Tuxedo back there, and who you can't see because she's a little shadow is Ava. She's like a tiny little blacker than black little dog that tends to just kind of hang out in the background. So those two
Perfect.
are
Okay.
hanging with me today.
Okay. All right. Well, they'll be welcome participants.
Mm.
I should say, as always, before we kick it off, appreciate everybody out there. Appreciate your support. You can go to verynotram.com, check out all the cycles that we offer, on-ramp programs for bodyweight, dumbbell, barbell, running programs, barbell strength programs. Get your first strict pull-up, toes to bar, muscle-up, handstand walk. Really cool stuff. Uploaded right to the BTWB app, so check that out. And the other part is, if you own a gym, you got to do all the non-sexy stuff, the workout tracking, gym management, and billing. BTWB now has an all-in-one solution that just handles all that in one nice little tidy place. So go to btwb.com if you own a gym, any type of gym, and you'll be good to go. Okay, we got a good question today, one that somebody sent to you, I believe, and they sent my way here, and it is from Jamie. I'll read Jamie's question, and then we'll go ahead and dive in. Dear Pat and Boz, my name is Jamie. I'm a window cleaner in New Mexico. I've been doing CrossFit for 7 years, and the fitness I've gained has helped me immensely on the job. I enjoy your podcast, listen to it often. I have two questions. First of all, are seasonal breaks okay? The summer is busy season at work. As I get older, busier, and the summers here get hotter, my motivation and energy to go to the gym wanes, though it returns in the fall, winter, and spring. This is compounded by the fact that I love working out in cold weather, and I feel like my body responds better in the cold than the heat. As long as I keep working and I do something physical away from work, will taking the hottest part of the year away from the gym hurt? Okay, so that's the first part. Second one, how much squatting is too much? My gym practices strength bias programming with a strength piece and a conditioning piece programmed in each class. I know it's not classical CrossFit programming, but it works for us. While I was taking some time off, I went through the last few months of programming, found that a squat variation was programmed just about 60% of the time. Is this excessive? Thanks for your time. Always look forward to the new topics. So, first of all, Jamie, we'll dive into all those things, but I have to say, I already know the title I'm going to put for this show because it basically is going to be how much squatting is too much because people will be like, ah, there cannot be enough. What are you, heresy? So, I mean, Jamie, thank you for the world's most perfect title. But anyway, we got a couple questions in there. Boz, any initial thoughts before we, really dive in?
My initial thought is that window cleaning is such a cool profession. I've always
Thank
thought,
you.
yeah, that like an arborist or window cleaner on a high rise, anybody who's got that kind of responsibility with climbing, rigging, and some aspect of their job kind of hinges on that, I think is super cool. So I don't know if Jamie is involved in that kind of window cleaning, but in my mind, that's what I'm seeing, and I just think that's such a cool profession. So at
It's
any
so
rate.
funny you say that because as I was taking notes about stuff that I wanted to discuss, the first thing that I wrote down was window cleaner. So cool. I want to
Yeah.
interview you about your occupation. Like nothing about
Totally.
fitness. I want to learn more. Are we talking ground level? Is it a step ladder? Are you 50 stories up in some
Hmm.
scaffolding? So anyway, yeah, that was the first thing that hopped into my mind as well.
Yeah, that's funny, and also very cool that there's some obvious overlap there stated by him that what he's doing in the gym has a direct impact on his ability to do his job. I mean, like that's the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate, in my opinion, is like, hey, the stuff I'm doing actually tangibly helps me live my life in a better, more productive way. It's like, dude, you're winning. It doesn't matter what your numbers are at that point, or
Agreed.
whether you think you're making progress or you're not, or you're happy with it or you're not. That's as good as it gets, as far as I'm
Agreed.
concerned. So,
So let's dive into his. He's got a couple questions, and the first one is the short question is: are seasonal breaks okay? And the refresher
yep,
was in Arizona, super hot in the summer. The
yep.
motivation's not there. That's the busy season for his job, which is physically demanding. Is taking this seasonal break gonna hurt what I do in the gym?
Yeah, I honestly think this question is a bit of a layup. When you lay it out like that, it is a no brainer, in my opinion, to say, of course, take that off. and come right back and just get to work when it starts to cool down and when you have the time that's appropriate for it. I see no issue with taking that time away, particularly if you're the type of individual that doesn't struggle with the motivation to restart. I think the caveat is if you're somebody that has a hard time building the habit or getting back into the habit, you might want to be a little bit more, I don't know, reserved about the time that you step away. But if that is not an issue and it's something that you are excited to get back to, and in many cases, a little break can get you excited to return.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So if that's the condition, then I would say absolutely. And I'll give you a little personal kind of anecdote with this too. I was just back home on Vancouver Island where I grew up. And it's such a recreationally dense part of the world. My brother and I grew up hiking and mountain biking and rock climbing and skiing and swimming and all that kind of stuff. And summertime was busy with a lot of activities. My brother still lives there. And, that's his approach when it's summertime and it's actually nice enough to be doing things.
It's time
He's
to
out
play.
surfing. Yeah, he's out hiking. He's out taking my niece to go do things out in the world. And then when the weather gets bad and the days get short, you don't feel like being outside. That's when he's in the gym. And I think what a cool rhythm, and to get back to my thrust originally about what an awesome, awesome thing to have what you're doing in the gym push you forward in your other areas of your life. That's just one more example of that. The fitness that he gains during that kind of winter period allows him to go out and explore and do these things, that he wants to do when the time comes. So to me, it's a great expression of it if you can find that rhythm and not struggle with getting back into the habit when the time comes for it.
Agreed. And to give Jamie as much information as possible, we're going to play a little good cop, bad cop.
Perfect.
Or
Yeah.
maybe cop A, cop B. Just two sides of a coin, right? So here's my short answers to your questions, Jamie. Are seasonal breaks okay? Yes. As long as I keep working and doing something physical away from work during the hottest part of the year, will this hurt what I do in the gym? Yes. And what I mean by that is, I've got no doubt that your job is physically demanding. Like, for sure. You can work all day long, moving things around, getting up and down ladders. Like, you're not sitting on a couch. If you do that for 3 months during the hottest part of the year, I don't expect your deadlift to increase, you to PR your 5K run time, or your Fran to be cut by 20 seconds. I don't expect that to happen. So when you say, will this hurt what I do in the gym? I think it just means compared to what? That's what I mean. If you're saying, will I come back and all my metrics will be precisely the same because I didn't touch them for 3 months? That seems illogical to me. Now, if you're just saying, I'm a recreational athlete, I work out because I want to stay fit and that I enjoy it, I'm not trained to make like the qualification for some competition or whatnot, and so what it means by quote unquote, will it hurt what I do in the gym? Well, if you're okay with your 5Ks a little slower, Fran stings even more than you remember, and it's certainly not a PR, and back squat's not quite where it was 90 days ago, but you still can squat, then you're not hurting what you did in the gym. It's just one of those things don't get better by not doing them. So you have to do them to get better, but being outside, being physical, I don't think you're hurting your long-term health on planet Earth. Again, as long as you're not eating like a drunken pirate this entire time, I think you're going to be just fine. But just realize when you say, "Will this hurt what I do in the gym?" There are some things that if you were sitting in front of me, I'd ask as to like, what do you mean hurt? Compared to what? So that would be just kind of something I would throw out there.
Yeah, I agree completely that when you come back to the gym that first day after a little bit of a time away, it's not going to be the day that you set the world on fire. That should be pretty obvious. I agree completely. I'll also say, though, for people that have been consistent year over year, even with that consistency including a down period that's planned and expected, the time it takes to bounce back is usually shorter than you think it will be. And so in my mind, if you are, again, in my mind, Jamie is somebody who's consistent, doesn't struggle with the motivation, has been doing this and plans to do this for the long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, under those conditions, yes, you can expect that little dip, but I think you could also expect that in a matter of weeks, you're going to be pretty close to where you were below that base or before that break. And to extend that forward, there's no reason that season over season, you can't push the needle outward a little bit, have that expected, kind of regression, push it outward even further the next season, et cetera. And so that if you zoom out over the long term, you are looking at progress year over year. It just may not be as linear or as significant as somebody who's only dedicated to their numbers in the gym. And that might be a trade-off that's totally worth it.
And to add some more context to my bad cop role in this as well. Like I said, the first one is a seasonal break. Okay? Yes, of course it's okay. Mm-hmm. There are no rules, Jamie. Like you have unlimited freedom, my friend. You can take a break when you want. You can double up. Like, you can do whatever you want to do. This is your strength and conditioning world. So is it cool? You're darn right it's cool. Now some other things, and like we said, we're making some good assumptions about you that motivation's not an issue, because once the cooler weather comes back, you can do it. That's great. What I would just say is, if this doesn't apply to Jamie, maybe it applies to some other people. Not motivated to work out in the summer. I've been to Arizona in the summer. It's scorching. Like, that makes sense to me that it doesn't feel like you want to work out. The only thing I would say, and again, I'm not saying this is you, Jamie, is that for many people, if you only work out when you're motivated, you're not going to work out too frequently. If I only flossed my teeth when I was motivated to floss my teeth, I would not floss my teeth very regularly. If I only ate healthy, like, there are certain things where, like, there's that discipline and motivation, right? And the two do go hand in hand. And so it sounds like Jamie has the discipline to get back on track. That's great. I would just say, sometimes only doing something, working out is good for you. Eating well is good for you. Getting enough sleep is good for you. And those are things that ideally most people will do as just part of a disciplined lifestyle to achieve the endpoint that they want, whether they're having a week of motivation or a week in the toilet of motivation. I'm not saying that's exactly Jamie's scenario, but just a general thing that I would throw out there. And the only other thing that I would say, and again, maybe this doesn't apply to Jamie, but it might apply in general, is maybe there's some hybrid, right? Like, Jamie's asking this question because maybe he is concerned that, what am I going to lose in the gym? If he wasn't concerned, maybe he wouldn't even be asking. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe there's something in the middle for you, Jamie, where it's not, I got to keep my old gym routine during the hottest times of summer for 3 months, and the only other option is 0 time in the gym. There might be some middle hybrid where 3 times a week for 30 minutes. I think you would be shocked and surprised at how much you could get done in 30 minutes, 3 times a week, even at reduced loading, reduced intensity, like you're just moving with some functional movements, exerting yourself at whatever level you feel like on that day. There can be a huge amount of benefit doing that, and you could be shocked as to how much it takes the pressure off because you're not trying to do exactly what you used to do. And to say that you could maintain a lot, I think, is an understatement.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's a great point, that there's not often this either or type choice to be made. I'd also say that one way you could strategize that, this kind of jogged a thought in my head there, is you could pick the 1 or 2 things that would be most important to you to not have slide back. And so maybe let's just say arbitrarily that's my deadlift strength and my pull-up count, or whatever those 2 things are that happen to be important to you. And you could frame it in a way that maybe it's even just once a week you have a workout that touches those elements to make sure that they're preserved a little bit more than some of the other things that maybe you don't care as much about. They're nice to have, but they don't really resonate with you that much. That could be an easy way to strategize that kind of middle ground approach. Okay, what is it that's really important that I hang on to? Let me make sure that I get just a little exposure to these things in those down months. And then when I'm back to it, I should expect that it's a pretty smooth ride back to where I was.
So yes, I think that should, again, just something to keep in mind. And then his second primary question, if you're done with the first one.
Yeah.
Okay. Second primary, how much squatting is too much squatting? So, strength piece plus conditioning piece every day. And he analyzed it, and it seemed like there was a squat variation programmed about 60% of the time. Is this excessive?
Yeah. Tough to say just based on those numbers. I think the 2 critical lenses that you have to look with And this is kind of bridging over the theme that we've already talked about, which is like, well, like compared to what? I think you have to look at two things. Number one, this is an old Greg Glassman idea, which is you're doing too much when you see performance start to dip back down. So when I'm too tired because I'm doing too much like physical work in the gym, that results start to creep down. I can't maintain intensity. What I could do in the past, I can't do now because I'm too fatigued, that sort of thing. You're doing too much. It almost sounds obvious when you spell it out, but it can be hard to see that when you're in the middle of a program sometimes. So that's the first thing to kind of take a step back and look at. How is my progress, in this case with squatting? Is it continuing to improve? Well, in that case, it's probably not too much. But the flip side of that coin is that every time you invest time into one thing, you are making the choice to necessarily not invest that time into something else. And so the question then becomes, if I'm seeing great progress at squatting, but I haven't seen an improvement anywhere else in 6 months, well, that should be a pretty obvious answer too, that the squatting is taking way too much effort and attention away from some of these other elements that are not receiving that same attention. So those are the two filters that I would encourage you to come back to. Hey, am I seeing progress? And then number two, what is not getting done because we're squatting so much? And is that actually a problem? It might not be.
Yeah, it might not be.
Yeah.
That's a great metric to use, right? Feel good, perform good. That right there. Running the numbers. So if 60% of the time there's a squat variation, like Jamie said, it also just depends upon how many sessions there are per week. So 60% means if there's 5 workouts a week, you're squatting 3 times. 60% means if there's a workout every day, 7 days a week, then 4.2 times, so 4 days out of 7, there's a squat involved. Is that right or wrong? I mean, now you're asking me for my personal opinion, which I'm more than happy to give.
I'll say it's a lot of squatting.
So I'll say it's I'll say it's a lot of squatting, and I'll say, but I'm still going to default to what you said. If everything's going in the right direction and you're not just feel like you can't recover and you're not tired all the time and you still got good motivation, then it's tough to say that it's too much. If you're asking me, what have I seen work for most people, most circumstances, most of the time, I would say the sweet spot is going below parallel twice a week. And if every now and then it happens to be a session a week that it occurs 3, that's okay. I would personally strive not to have that be the norm. I think the sweet spot's 2. But you're in that 2 to 3 range, and I'd like to see the 3 be the exception, not the rule. If you're asking me my personal opinion as to what I think as a blanket statement works for most people that will be pursuing fitness. I think also what I would love to know if Jamie was here is, what does a squat variation mean? Now, if you say that a squat variation is on one day it's a 7x1 back squat, and then 3 days later it's Cindy, I think that sounds really cool. I mean, those are 2 below parallel, they're 2 squats, they're very different. If your idea when you say squat variation, especially in the context of it's a place that, well, they probably don't do a 7x1 if it's heavy day plus strength plus metcon every day. But so in this situation, if it's a squat variation, does that mean 60% of the time heavy loaded squat? Okay, now that's not what we're talking about with a 7x1 compared to Cindy, where one's high volume with just body weight, one's very low rep with high weight. Now we're talking the squat variation is kind of similar all the time, heavy below parallel. I think that's a different story, but I don't have that information at this time.
Yeah, fair enough. And I agree with you. I think if that 60%, like you said, is just, hey, these are all heavy strength-based type of attempts.
We back squatted yesterday, but we're front squatting heavy today.
Right, exactly. I mean, hey, that's great. That worked for a lot of weightlifting programs throughout the decades. However, the caveat being that they're not trying to do anything else beyond that, typically, or the things they are trying to do within that sport are pretty narrowly defined, and so that's a very different expression. But yeah, so I agree with you. I think. Hard to say at the outset, but I think it is definitely worth a look when you start creeping into that kind of percentage to say, all right, how are we doing generally, and what may not be getting addressed at this point because of this volume of squatting. And I'll say too that just kind of zooming way back out and talking about a program, it's always interesting, and maybe this is a little out there, but when you talk about any program, where my head immediately goes to is like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about this week? Are we talking about this month? Are we talking about the program since its inception to the current day? What is the time frame here? Because most quote unquote programs that I've ever been exposed to have ebbs and flows in pieces that they focus on. They have ebbs and flows in overall intensity and volume. They have ebbs and flows in movement selection and combinations. And so, yeah, there may be a time, maybe it's even a prolonged period of time where a program focuses on lots of squats. That doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case. And that maybe, a couple months from now, that focus shifts to some degree and there's something else at play that becomes a more dominant focus. So at that point, what are we saying is the program, the most recent aspect of it or the totality of it? Mm-hmm. So it gets a little complicated, but to land that plane and zoom back in, if we're talking about a stretch of time and that high number of squatting is taking place, it's like, yeah, I think it's worth the question to see if it's worth an adjustment at this time or if you can continue down that track for a while.
Yes, and I would just say, like we said, before in shows, as a general rule, the most, remember, like, heavy squatting is critically important. I've got heavy squats programmed 2 or 3 days from now. But you do the heavy squat, you do the heavy dead, you do the heavy whatever, but you really get strong when you allow your body to rest. And that's it. So if you're not allowing that rest, that's when the conversation starts to get interesting. That's when I would look under the hood because, there is a law of diminishing returns. There is some point where one more workout doesn't get you fitter. Your body actually really could have used a break. And the same thing happens with heavy lifting as well for your musculature, your central nervous system, your whatnot. I've seen, just in my personal experience, plenty of people expose themselves very regularly to heavy weight and achieve some level of success or strength and then be forced to throttle back either because they were open-minded to a different idea or because they plateaued and hit a wall. And much to their shock, when they did throttle back and reduce the number of heavy lifting sessions, things went profoundly well because they actually had this now work-rest ratio and balance coming back in. So, check it out. Things are going in a great direction. Fantastic. If you're asking me what I think works for most people most of the time, I think 2 times below parallel a week is a sweet spot. But again, if it's working for you, that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing I wanted to say, I had this big note, just armchair psychology.
Okay.
Everybody's favorite topic, yeah. And so I think I've got kind of an armchair assessment to throw out there for both questions. And for the first question, talking about taking a layoff and then coming back and, you're still active, but it's not gym active, so to speak. I do think that the type of person that CrossFit attracts is also the type of person in many cases that gets really hyper fixated on numbers and progress and that sort of thing. And so there is going to be a psychological aspect to seeing some of those gains, those sweet, sweet gains just kind of slip away a little bit. And you have to be prepared for that. Or at least most people that I've seen that are involved with CrossFit have to be prepared for that because it can be pretty confronting, you know what I mean? So you got to go into that eyes wide open and you have to understand, you're like, yeah, this is normal and it's what I've accepted as part of this like stepping away and it's not going to be forever and it's fine. If you can do that, then awesome, take that break. So same thing when we're talking about, is this much squatting too much squatting? And it sounds like this question is being asked from a third party, Pat, who is not responsible for scripting the program themselves.
Yes, true.
It can be a difficult conversation sometimes when you go to that person that is programming and you're like, hey, bro, we're squatting too much. That is probably not going to get the result that you are looking for, even if it might be true. So there is a psychological aspect to how do we approach this problem and make sure that it actually gets solved instead of it just becomes this defensive non-conversation. And so I would recommend reading between the lines. If Jamie finds himself in the situation where he thinks this program needs adjustment, approach it through what is not being developed currently. And so the example I would give is, hey coach, I'm loving this squatting. I feel like my legs are getting super strong. My PRs are all going up. It's awesome. I'd also like to develop my muscle up a little bit more. When are we doing that? What's the plan for that? And that gives that programmer a bit of an out to say, hey, you know what, that's coming up, or hey, I hadn't thought of that, or oh, cool, thanks for letting me know that this is a goal of yours and I can consider that. Instead of this kind of blunt approach of we're squatting too much, something needs to change. Because almost anybody who's writing a program at that point is going to be like, whoa, 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 pump the brakes. Just
Yep.
trust
Oh,
the
yeah.
process. It's going to be a hard sell if you come at it with that kind of directness, in my experience at least.
Fitness is easy, people are hard.
Exactly, you said it, yeah.
100%. Well, Jamie, I hope that helped. That was actually a really cool topic and a couple questions with a bunch of other things kind of interwoven in there. So hopefully we helped shed some light on what you got going on. And I'm still genuinely fascinated about your occupation as a window cleaner. And I would love to sit down and have a cup of coffee
Yeah.
with you and just pick your brain. It sounds intriguing to me. And other than that, appreciate everybody, as we always say. This is everybody else's program. It's not mine and Adrian's. All of you drive the content. So just like Jamie did, if you've got an idea for a topic or a future show, you can, on Instagram, go to the Very Not Random Instagram account, post a question. We see those. You can send a direct message to the Very Not Random Instagram account if you'd rather be anonymous. And you can go to the BTWB YouTube channel under the Very Not Random playlist, find this show, and post thoughts for upcoming topics. Or if you or anyone else has an opinion on what we discussed today, leave it there as well. The more minds, the merrier. So for Adrian Bosman, I'm Pat Sherwood, and we'll see you next time.